Not long after the wedding, Jack casually mentioned me during a conversation. If you can't marry someone you love, then just marry someone obedient. Turns out, the reason he wouldn't touch me was because he already had someone in his heart. When I was cornered with no way out, I set my sights on the man staying at Jack's house. He kept a low profile, spent all day copying scriptures, and was detached from earthly desires, avoiding women. I seduced him and broke his vow. 3 months later, I happily found out I was pregnant. Jack lost it. Zoe, who did you sleep with? Later, I signed the divorce papers and went solo to the hospital to get an abortion. But there wasn't a single doctor in the city willing to perform the surgery. And the man I thought was just a guest in Jack's house got out of a luxurious car and blocked my way. Zoe, if you don't want me or our child, you won't find a more heartless woman in the world. Just after breakfast, Jack's mom called Jack and me to the study. Zoe, you've been married for 3 months now. It's time to start thinking about having kids. She eyed me coldly, disapprovingly from every angle. I wasn't the daughter-in-law she wanted. I only got to marry Jack because his grandmother liked my personality. Naturally, she had no fondness for me, but having a baby wasn't solely my call to make. Jack had someone else in his heart and refused to touch me. Who would believe that 3 months into my marriage, I was still a virgin? Your family took $1 billion as a bride price from Jack's family. You married into this house, and we've been treating you like royalty. But here you are, still not showing any signs of pregnancy. Jack's mom's words got harsher, making me restless. I couldn't help but look at Jack for support. Jack ignored me, stood up with a lazy smile. If she can't get pregnant, why not see a doctor? It's her body that's the problem, not me. If she can't have a baby, they better figure it out. After all, doesn't her family deal in all kinds of shady business? Jack left, abandoning me in the study. Zoe, Jack's mom was furious and started berating me again. If you're not pregnant within 6 months, then you better divorce Jack. If you can't win Jack's heart, or have a child, we don't need a daughter-in-law like you. We'll return half the bride price. That's us being more than fair. I had no way to explain my suffering. Of the $1 billion bride price, I only received $1 million. I'm sure the rest had already been used to cover my family's debts. No one was going to help me return that $50 million. My parents wouldn't take me back or cover for me. They were pushing me to a dead end. But why should I let them have their way? The marriage was decided by Jack's grandmother, not forced by me. It wasn't my fault that Jack had someone else in his heart and wouldn't touch me. My parents' years of business failures weren't my responsibility. Yet, in the end, all the blame fell on me. I felt so bitter, with no one to talk to. Since my mother passed away several years ago, I didn't have a place in my family anymore. Unknowingly, I found myself in Jack's backyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. I stared at the sky, feeling utterly lost about the future, tears rolling down my face. In the distance, the little courtyard suddenly opened its gate. That young man in simple grey clothes appeared, in the thick twilight, as he walked towards me. For a moment, I thought I had seen a ghost. It took me a while to remember that Jack's family had a distant relative. I heard he came from the south for medical treatment, and was temporarily staying in this courtyard. It must be him. Still, I never thought this man would be so handsome. His everyday clothes were soft and slightly worn, draping perfectly. It highlighted his tall and elegant figure. In the deep blue dusk, his slightly pale face was smooth and jade-like. The hand holding out a handkerchief to me had long, slender fingers like pipes of jade. I noticed a string of blood-red coral beads on his lean wrist. I somehow asked, "Are you feeling better?" The man's cold but calm gaze met mine. I had been crying sorrowfully. My nose was red, and my long lashes were still wet with tears, ready to fall. To my surprise, he reached out and gently wiped away my tears. "Better," he spoke, his Mandarin a bit awkward with a strong southern accent. I was slightly taken aback, but nodded. "That's good. Winters in the north are cold. You must not be used to it." "It's okay. Just a bit dry. Not quite used to it. You need to use a humidifier." He nodded. "Thank you." I wiped my tears, glanced deeply at him, and stood up. "It's late. I should head back." Leo said no more, watching her walk on, disappearing into the dark night. Her slim, lonely silhouette made her seem so isolated and cold. Leo had heard a few things from the servants. Jack's new wife was very quiet and obedient, a lady among ladies. But unfortunately, Jack didn't like her, and aside from Jack's gravely ill grandmother, his family didn't like her either. He couldn't help but recall how she cried earlier. Her sobs were soft and suppressed, yet so painful. His gentlemanly upbringing was deeply ingrained, making him wonder why such an obedient girl wasn't loved. That night, I lay sleepless, until dawn, when the thought fully rooted itself in my mind. I finally drifted off. Jack said I should find my own way to have a child, that I had all sorts of tricks. So, I decided I would go ahead and really use those tricks for once. I only had $1 million left now. If I gave $1 million to the man, who's been living under someone else's roof, for him to give me a child, it's a fair trade. He'd probably agree, right? Before falling into a deep sleep, I seemed to feel the warmth of his fingertips again. That moment when he wiped my tears, he was really gentle. But, on my 4th visit to that small courtyard, Leo stood at the gate and for the first time, didn't let me in. He lowered his gaze and didn't look at me. It's late. It's not convenient to let you in. Don't come here anymore. To avoid catching any germs. I stood on the steps, looking up at him. I'm not leaving. Leo pressed his lips together, but still didn't look at me. The cold wind went through my thin coat, making me cough repeatedly. Yet I stubbornly refused to leave. A few minutes later, he seemed to give in and glanced at me. He slightly stepped aside to let me in. His room was as warm as spring, with books and pens on the desk. And the small humidifier I gave him last time was still there. Leo ignored me and walked to his desk, continuing to write. The red coral beads on his wrist wound around his slender wrist, both chaste and sexy. I couldn't help but reach out to touch them. He paused slightly, but didn't avoid my touch. Why do you wear these beads? I was unhealthy as a child. An elder got them for me at a temple. Can they bring you good luck and keep you safe? It's just for peace of mind. He tried to pull his arm back, but I held onto the beads. Has any other woman touched your beads? Leo was silent for a moment, then shook his head. No. Has any other woman touched you? Leo's eyes, dark as obsidian, opened slightly. After a few seconds, he looked away, avoiding my gaze. His ears turned red, and his voice got a bit rough. No. There was a soft couch behind his desk. He usually used it for naps. But now, Leo, wearing only light grey traditional home clothes, was underneath me on that couch. His fingers, used to holding a brush, were now gripping my waist. Maybe because of the heat, my cheeks were flushed, and my body was burning. But Leo felt like a piece of consistently warm, smooth jade. Getting close to him made me feel comfortable from the inside. Since I was little, I'd only had a secret crush on a transfer student in my teens. Thinking about it now, that transfer student was also skinny and handsome, quiet, courteous to everyone yet distant. He reminded me a bit of Leo. I heard you're going back south after the new year. Yes. Will you come back? Not necessarily. Don't come back. It's not good here at all. I looked down at him. Are you fully recovered? Almost. I'll give you some money, so you can go back and recuperate. I slowly lowered my head, our breaths mingling. Is that okay? His gaze changed gradually, the originally gentle eyes turning cold. In the next moment, he tried to push me away, so I just threw myself into his arms, kissing him, tears falling silently as I choked and pleaded. I'll give you money. You give me a child. Just save me once, okay? The red coral beads on his wrist left marks of varying depth on my waist, inner thighs, and chest. I cried softly, whimpering, scratching faint blood marks on his shoulder and back. Zoe. Leo stopped, looking at me in disbelief. How? Jack never touched me. He has someone he likes. Zoe. Deep pain spread in Leo's eyes. Fortunately, I don't love him either. I raised my arm again, wrapping it around Leo's neck. I just want a child. Leo didn't answer, just kissed me more deeply, his cool beads pressed against my cheek. My tears welled up from the corners of my eyes and slowly dripped onto them. He kissed my tears away tenderly. When everything was over, I dressed up to leave. Leo walked me out. When we reached the gate, I turned back and smiled at him. I'll come again tomorrow night. These days are my fertile period. He said nothing, just lowered his gaze and buttoned my coat one by one. Finally, he gently helped me put my scarf on. Walk carefully. Don't twist your ankle. I found Leo 3 times in a row. The 3rd time, he suddenly told me he had something at home and had to go back south early. I was a bit stunned, but still smiled lightly. Then I'll transfer the money to you tonight. And I acted nonchalant. I've been really happy the past few days, so even if I don't get pregnant, I'll still give you the full amount. Leo shook his head. I won't take it. I didn't say much, but in my heart, I was determined to give it to him whether he wanted it or not. Once the money and goods were settled, we'd have nothing left to do with each other. On the day Leo went back to Hong Kong, Jack's family, out of courtesy, hosted a farewell dinner for him. That night, I wore a dark green velvet dress, my hair half tied up, sitting beside Jack. Leo happened to be right across from me. He didn't look at me the entire time, and I only greeted him politely when I took my seat. However, contrary to his usual indifference to me, Jack seemed different tonight. Several times, I felt Jack's gaze landing on me. It was even quite burning and intense. Midway through the meal, he personally ladled chicken soup for me. When I softly thanked him, Jack suddenly leaned closer, his voice low. "Zoe, why do you look especially beautiful these days?" His hand fell intimately on my shoulder, wrapping around me. There were still kiss marks from Leo on my neck, visible if you parted my hair. I nearly lost my composure and was about to stand up when suddenly, Leo spoke up. "Jack, maybe I was too nervous and imagined it, but..." The moment Leo spoke, Jack's hand withdrew instantly. He even straightened up in his seat obediently. "Brother." I couldn't help but look at Leo. His gaze met mine. It was the first time I saw him in a suit. He seemed so different, so dignified, like a cold, bright moon hanging in the sky. In contrast, I felt dirty and unworthy. I lowered my eyes, not daring to look at him again, but my heart ached mildly. "You and your wife seem to have a good relationship," Leo said in a calm, low voice, betraying no emotion. Under the table, my hand clenched suddenly. Jack laughed. "Yeah, Zoe is so beautiful. I really like her." Leo also smiled, but there was a faintness to it. "Indeed, Jack, you are very lucky." I felt a moment of shock and bit my lip subconsciously. My heart felt like an electric current passed through it, a sore and swelling pain. Jack seemed a bit surprised and furrowed his brows slightly. Leo continued, "Jack, don't waste your luck." His gaze brushed past me, landing on Jack's face. Jack nodded with a smile. "Fourth brother, I got it. By the way, how come you've been speaking so smoothly these days?" Jack's mother also chimed in with a teasing smile. "It's rare to see Leo like this." Inside, my emotions were a complex mix I couldn't describe. Every word Leo said seemed to remind Jack to treat me well. But how could he know that Jack's heart had long belonged to someone else? Our so-called marriage was like that of strangers, never to break the ice. After the banquet, Leo had to catch a flight to the airport. Jack held my hand, walking him out. The northern winter was extremely cold. I wrapped my shawl tighter, but still shivered, sneezing twice in succession. Yet Jack didn't notice at all. Leo, walking ahead, suddenly stopped. He turned, his gaze seeming to linger on me for half a second. Then he said to Jack, "It's cold outside. You guys should go back." "How can we?" Jack started to say, but Leo's calm voice held an inexplicable authority. "No need. Go back." Jack could only stop. Leo turned again and walked towards the car not far away. It was then that I dared to let my gaze fall on his back. With small snowflakes falling, his tall, slender figure in a black coat stood rigid but upright. He reminded me of resilient bamboo in the snowstorm. Before getting into the car, he looked back one last time. Through the flying snow mist, his handsome face was quiet and undisturbed. In the black and white world, the trace of red on his wrist stung my heart. I didn't know if he saw me, but soon, he bent and got into the car. Standing next to me, Jack sighed lightly. "Let's go inside. It's snowing heavily." I slowly raised my eyes, watching the car disappear. I knew, the past between Leo and me would be buried completely under this heavy snow. And for the rest of our lives, we might never meet again. Back in the room, for once Jack didn't walk away hastily. He watched as I removed my shawl and took off my jewelry at the dressing table. Suddenly he walked behind me, gently holding my shoulders. "Zoe, you look good today." I didn't speak, just continued to take off my earrings. Jack leaned closer and unexpectedly whispered in my ear, "Zoe, don't you want a child?" I found it laughable. How cheap and shallow such supposed deep feelings could be. But before I could respond, his phone rang. It was his first love, Jenny, calling. He went to the terrace to answer the call, and by the time he returned, I had already prepared his coat for going out. Jack looked displeased and eventually spoke slowly. "You're not going to stop me." I lowered my eyes, handing the coat to him. "Go on. She's crying pretty badly. Don't let anything happen." Jack grabbed the coat and left, slamming the door. Jack's mother was obviously furious, but couldn't bring herself to scold her son. Instead, she found an excuse to harshly reprimand me. That night, I came down with a high fever. I was ill for a week. During that week, Jack only came back once, stayed for half an hour, and then left again. No matter how cold he was, I felt no waves in my heart, only an inexplicable sadness, making my recovery very slow. When the snow finally cleared on a sunny day, I felt a bit stronger and wanted to take a walk. Unconsciously, I wandered to the back garden. Leo's former residence, the small courtyard, had its door ajar. I could faintly hear the sound of cleaning inside. I stood outside in a daze for a long time, until the young man, who had been attending to Leo, opened the door from inside and spoke respectfully. Mr. Leo left this for you. He handed me a small brocade box. I was a bit stunned, but still took it. Inside the box, there was a card and a folded letter. I recognized the card. It was the one I placed under Leo's pillow on the last night. It contained all my savings, $1 million. The letter had only 2 short lines. Zoe, if you need anything, call me. I'll come to get you. Below was his signature, and a string of phone numbers. Staring at those 2 lines, tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. When Jack's grandmother was critically ill, Jack's entire family gathered at the hospital to visit. The room was full of her devoted children and grandchildren. Just as the elderly lady, feeling surprisingly well, asked for some fresh fish soup, I lost my composure and vomited in front of her bed. Jack's family immediately called for doctors and nurses to check on me. When they found out I was pregnant, the matriarch was overjoyed. She announced that all her shares would go to Jack and the unborn great-grandchild. Jack's mother, too, changed her usual attitude, holding my hand lovingly. The room was filled with joy and laughter, except for Jack, who lost his composure the moment he heard I was pregnant, accidentally knocking over a cup. Jack's mother, fearing he might anger the elderly lady, quickly asked him to take me back to the room to rest. As soon as we shut the door, Jack grabbed my neck and pushed me against it. Zoe, who did you let touch you? His eyes were bloodshot, and he was furious beyond measure. Ironically, I felt completely calm. You better make more noise, so the old lady hears and takes back the shares and inheritance. Then, this unspeakable scandal will spread all over North City. Let's see who ends up being embarrassed. Actually, I know Jack's temperament quite well. Sure enough, as soon as I finished speaking, Jack's grip loosened a bit. I grabbed his wrist and pushed him away, then rubbed my neck where it had turned red from the choking. Then I chuckled lightly and looked at him. I remember very well. It was you who told me to figure out how to have a child on my own, wasn't it? Zoe. Jack's eyes were filled with shock, like he was seeing me for the first time. In his eyes, I was always a dull, humble, obedient wife, like a puppet on strings. He couldn't believe I would do something so unbelievable. What shocked him even more, besides the anger and disbelief, was the feeling of dissatisfaction and jealousy in his heart. Who was the man who made Zoe so beautiful and vibrant? She was supposed to be his wife, and the child in her belly should have been his. But at this moment, Jack's phone rang abruptly. It was Jenny calling. When he answered, I faintly heard sobbing. Jack, I think I'm pregnant. Fate can be pretty ironic sometimes. Jenny, who wasn't accepted by Jack's family because of her poor background and physical issues making it hard for her to conceive, was suddenly pregnant. She used the child in her belly and her own life to force Jack to divorce me and marry her. Jack had been entangled with her for years, and now that she had a child, he finally had something to fight against his parents with. Of course, he wasn't going to refuse. Thinking back, if Jenny had gotten pregnant earlier, things wouldn't have turned out like this. I'm sure Jack would have been willing to give her and their child a proper status and divorce me peacefully. I wouldn't have ended up shouldering a $50 million debt or dragging innocent Leo into this. I agreed to sign the divorce papers, leave with nothing, and not have to return the exorbitant dowry. And Jack wanted me to abort the baby after the divorce. Honestly, he didn't have to say it. I wouldn't have kept the child anyway. I know how miserable it is to be a child without parental love. No need for my child to suffer the same pain. Moreover, after signing the divorce papers, leaving the Jack family, without that layer of protection, I was afraid the child might implicate Leo someday. I was the one who involved him. It was my action. He shouldn't bear the possible consequences. Jack's grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep the next day. While the Jack family was busy arranging the funeral, Jack and I signed the divorce agreement. Jack held the pen tightly, his eyes filled with complex emotions. Zoe, who is that man? I looked at him calmly. I'm not going to say. Do you like him, right? I paused for a moment, but still smiled and shook my head. It's none of your business. Having used a good man so disgracefully, what right did I have to talk about liking him? Until the grandmother's shares and inheritance matters were settled, I would cooperate and not disclose our divorce. I stood up to get my suitcase. During this time, I'll still be staying at the Jack family's other house. Sorry for the trouble. Zoe, you never cared about me as your husband, did you? I held the suitcase handle and smiled at him peacefully. Jack, when I married you, I did think about living a good life with you. Jack snorted self-deprecatingly. You never cared about Jenny's existence, right? I looked down at the ground, not answering. What woman hasn't imagined a happy future with her husband when getting married? I, too, had those silly hopes once, but I quickly woke up from those dreams. I'm leaving now. Take care. As I turned to leave, I could feel Jack's gaze on my back the whole time, but I never looked back. After moving to the other house, I started to contact the hospital to arrange for the surgery. But oddly, though we had scheduled a date, the next day, the hospital called to cancel it and asked me to make an appointment at another hospital. When I asked for a reason, they stammered and couldn't explain, and the call quickly ended. At first, I didn't pay much attention. It wasn't until the same thing happened a second, third time, that I realized someone must be meddling behind the scenes. I never thought about Leo. Until that day, I personally went to the hospital to get admitted and prepare for the surgery to remove the baby, only to be rejected again. Even the director came when he heard about it. Zoe, it's not that we're unwilling to schedule the surgery for you, we really can't. Can't? Why not? I looked at the director, who was sweating profusely on his forehead. The child is mine. I have the right to decide whether to keep it or not. No one else has the right to decide. I'm having the surgery today, otherwise, I'll sit here and not leave. I slowly sat down on the bench, my emotions complex. The baby was getting bigger every day, and that natural bond of flesh and blood was making my heart softer by the day. I dread thinking about when he starts to develop features and tiny fingers. When he moves gently in my belly, will I still be able to bear terminating him? Seeing my determination, the director didn't insist and quickly left. Moments later, a nurse led me to a VIP suite. Zoe, please rest here for a while. The hospital is still discussing the surgery. Can I know who you're discussing with? The nurse just shook her head. Zoe, I'm sorry, I don't know anything. She left after speaking. I sat in the room till it grew dark. Through the half-open window, I faintly heard car engines and noises. I moved my stiff shoulders and back, stood up and went to the window. I looked down unintentionally, and saw an expensive luxury car pull up slowly below. Behind the luxury car, there were 5 or 6 SUVs. At first, I didn't pay much attention. I thought it was just some big shot coming to the hospital. But when the bodyguard opened the car door, it was Leo who stepped out. Leo, the distant relative of Jack's, who I thought had fallen on hard times. Leo, the sickly and poor man I had once paid $1 million to conceive a child with. Leo got out of the car and walked straight towards the small building where I was. After the initial shock, I had already figured everything out. Leo must have known about me and Jack signing the divorce papers. He also knew I wanted to get rid of this child. That's why no hospital dared to perform the surgery on me in the past few days. It was all orchestrated by him. I picked up my bag and turned to leave. Just as Leo stepped out of the elevator, I was about to walk into the one next to it. Our eyes met. I quickly averted my gaze and hurried into the elevator. But he reached out and gently grabbed my wrist. Zoe. It was still that thin, jade-like wrist. Still those blood-red coral beads. Still the same face, the same person. But somehow, he seemed like a complete stranger. I pulled my hand away and continued walking into the elevator. But Leo grabbed my wrist again. Zoe, let's talk. His grip tightened slightly. I tried to pull free, but couldn't. The hallway was empty. I didn't know since when. I looked into his eyes, my face pale. Leo, what do you want to talk about? Leo stared at me for a few seconds. When he finally spoke, his first word was sorry. It was my fault. Zoe, I should have taken you with me when I left Jack's place, instead of leaving you behind. Take me with you. Why? In what capacity? As Jack's distant relative you were staying with, or as the Leo you are now, who I know nothing about, but seems unreachable. I shook off his hand and took a step back. The night I gave you that $1 million, our deal was over. Now, whatever I do has nothing to do with you. But Zoe, you were the one crying to me, saying you wanted a child, that you needed my help. That's no longer necessary. I lowered my head, fighting back tears. I've signed the divorce papers, so this child. My heart ached, but I forced myself to be ruthless. There's no need for it. Besides, it would just be a trouble for you. Trouble? Leo chuckled softly. Zoe, he is alive, he's my blood, but he's just an embryo now. I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down my face. If he's gone, it won't hurt that much. Zoe, you don't want me, and now you don't even want my child. There isn't another woman more heartless than you. It was just a transaction, Leo. Don't you get it? Transaction. Do you think I would have sex with a woman just for a so-called transaction? Do you think I, Leo, would let any woman carry my child so easily? He stepped forward and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. Zoe, did you think I went to Jack's to recover? Do you think any woman can soften me with a few tears? Do you think anyone can touch these coral beads, can get into my bed? He let go of my chin, and instead held my cold hand against his chest. Zoe, didn't you feel anything when I kissed you that first night? Leo. I stared, my vision blurred. His face was still as handsome as ever, but in his eyes, there was a restrained tenderness. I thought about how Leo had kept to himself after coming to Jack's, but that day, he opened the gate and approached me crying. I remembered the handkerchief he gave me, the humidifier I sent that he kept on his desk, how he buttoned my coat and wrapped my scarf on that cold night, what he said to Jack the day we left, the card and letter he left for me. Everything made sense now. But I had never thought in that direction. No, I dared not think, with my dark mindset, the Zoe who, as Jack said, had taken the wrong path out of desperation, could be quietly loved and pitied by someone. Leo raised his hand and gently wiped away my tears. Go back, take a shower, and get some rest. I'll handle everything else. He held my hand, getting ready to leave, but I didn't move. Why, Leo? I don't believe in love at first sight. Leo looked at me, then suddenly smiled softly. I don't believe in it either. Then why? He stood under the hallway light, his thin face cast in shadows. He didn't look at me, just touched the coral beads on his wrist. After a long time, he spoke slowly. I haven't been in good health. My elders always worried I wouldn't have children. He removed the beads and offered them to me. I had them blessed this time. Wearing them will protect you and the baby. I stared at the blood-red beads in his long fingers, feeling a mix of relief and pain. So that's it. It's all for the baby. Leo put the coral beads on my wrist. Come with me. I was indeed exhausted, completely drained. He wasn't even in the city, and the hospitals still wouldn't dare touch me. Now that he was here, I knew there was no use resisting. I followed him downstairs, to the car. Leo held my hand the whole time. Even once in the car, he didn't let go. Zoe, come back south with me. What for? To be your mistress like in the old days. I chuckled bitterly. Jack's family already looked down on me, let alone Leo. Thinking back, Jack's family's attitude in front of him wasn't as polite as I thought. Even Jack must really fear this fourth brother. This isn't how things work in my family. You wouldn't marry me, would you? I looked at him, my smile not reaching my eyes. If you want to get married, forget it. I know better. I cut him off before he could finish. Right now, I don't want to think about love or marriage. I just want to live freely. Isn't it ridiculous? I can't even decide whether or not to keep the child in my belly. But, who can I blame? I was the one who approached Leo. You reap what you sow. I can only swallow this bitter fruit myself. Now my only worry is, if I must give birth, Leo will definitely take the child home. And I, after enduring the hardships of 10 months of pregnancy and childbirth, might not be able to let go. Leo first took me to Jack's villa to pack my luggage. Then, he drove me to his house in the North City overnight. The house wasn't very big, but it was exquisite. I stayed with Leo in the main courtyard in the southeast corner. Entering the courtyard and stepping into the front hall, the first thing I saw was a massive desk. It was still full of books and articles to be copied. The oddest thing was, in one corner of the desk, there was still the little duck humidifier I had given him. Such a childish thing seemed so out of place in the room. I thought he hadn't taken it with him when he left. I couldn't help but glance at Leo. Leo handed his coat to the servant and said casually, "The North City is too dry." I wasn't used to it, so I kept using it. Before I could say anything, he called a servant to take me to the room to freshen up. But it wasn't the guest room. It was the master suite. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, Leo and I had already been intimate multiple times, and now I was carrying his child, so there was no need to be coy. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out of the shower, the servants had already prepared new, clean loungewear. After changing, I went downstairs to eat. Leo was still at his desk, working. By the time I finished my chicken soup, he had just set down his writing brush. Our eyes met, and I suddenly remembered that small courtyard at Jack's place, the soft couch behind the desk, and Leo, who I had pinned underneath me. He looked so lean, his skin slightly pale, with a thin layer of calluses on his fingers from years of writing. Yet, he was surprisingly strong. A strange heat spread in my abdomen, and I quickly averted my gaze. But Leo had already walked around the desk to me. "I'm full, I'll head upstairs." Before I could finish speaking, Leo grabbed my chin, forcing me to look up. He leaned down and kissed me, covering my wide-open eyes with his other hand. "Zoe." He kissed my lips, sucking and licking gently. "Open your mouth." The heating was too warm, and I soon became sweat-covered. My wet fingertips clung to his back, then limply fell to the bedside. His back had a layer of lean, beautiful muscle. His waist was narrow, showing the outlines of his abs, with a sexy V-line. In a fleeting moment of clarity before surrender, I couldn't help but think. Leo said he was not in good health, and his elders worried about his future progeny. But now, He did not look like someone with poor health. Leo, maybe due to my muddled thoughts at that moment, I blurted out, "Aren't you in poor health?" He leaned down and kissed me, with a touch of laughter in his voice. "Zoe, be considerate of me." Considerate of what? Shouldn't I be the one who needs consideration? I'm pregnant. He held my waist, his slender fingers trailing downward from my abdomen, finally gripping my ankle lightly and lifting it. Newly awakened desires remain insatiably hungry for a long time. "Oh, have you never done this before?" "I'm not in good health. I must abstain and cultivate." "Then why are you doing this now? Aren't you risking your life?" "It's different now." "How's it different?" "Now, it's time for yin and yang to balance." "Leo, good girl, I know my limits. You're carrying our child, I promise. This is the last time. The last time for tonight." "Leo, Zoe, kiss me." Leo lowered his head, sucking on my earlobe. I seemed enchanted, mindlessly lifting my face to kiss his throat. And that kiss led to a seemingly endless last time. After that night, my relationship with Leo seemed to undergo a subtle change. Every day, without fail, he would read for 2 hours. But unlike before, when he stood alone at his desk, finishing in one go, now he sat in a round chair, with me on his lap, one hand holding the brush, the other arm around my waist. The scriptures got copied, but by the end his writing was messy. Even the once tidy desk now lay in disarray. Sometimes, I couldn't help but feel blurred, as if this man had no earthly desires. He seemed detached from love and lust, yet with that face, he could do the worst things. "Leo, does Buddha know you act like this in private?" "I'm just a registered disciple, not a monk." "What is there to fear?" Leo lifted me from the desk. "Shall I take you there this afternoon? Jack needs me to sign some papers about inheritance and stock transfer." Because of our shared secrets and interests, our interactions had become quite harmonious lately. The other day, Jack even said over the phone that once everything was settled, he would transfer $1 million to me. I didn't refuse. Money might not be everything, but it certainly is useful. Breaking free from Jack and starting a new life, I needed money. The driver can take me. After all, my divorce from Jack isn't public yet. I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. No matter what, Leo was still related to Jack's family. Leo didn't say anything, just looked down and gently touched the coral beads on my wrist. "Don't take this off. There's no harm in keeping it on. It's hidden under my sleeve anyway." "Okay, I won't take it off." But Leo still looked a bit unhappy. When I left in the afternoon, he didn't come out of his study. As the car drove out of the gate, I couldn't resist turning back to look. I saw Leo's lean figure standing on the steps outside the courtyard, watching in the direction my car was heading. For some reason, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, a lot of life's troubles come from overthinking. Since no one really knows what the future holds, why not just enjoy the present? At least, these days with Leo have been truly, incredibly happy. A person like him, with his background, is like a noble, cool moon, just hanging in the sky. Why should I get greedy and try to pull him down into my arms? Winter clothes are thick, so it wasn't until we were inside signing the papers that Jack noticed my slightly swollen belly. He tried to say something several times, but held back until the papers were all signed. After the lawyer and the secretary left, he finally spoke up. Pointing at my belly, he said, "You haven't been to the hospital yet. The baby's father isn't in good health. Their family line depends on him. So they begged me not to abort the child. But don't worry. I'll soon go south to take care of the pregnancy and give birth. I won't cause any trouble or burden for you and Jenny, or your soon-to-be-born child." Jack's face showed some unmistakable exhaustion and fatigue. "Zoe." He slowly sat down on the couch across from me. "Jenny lost the baby. We're still hiding it from the elders." "What? How come?" I was surprised. She's always been in poor health. Even staying in the hospital and being extra cautious didn't help. She still had a miscarriage. The doctor says it's due to her physical condition. Having another child will be very difficult, very difficult. Jack leaned back on the couch and covered his face with his hand, then laughed mockingly at himself. "Maybe this is just karma." "Zoe, I've been really tired recently. Jenny's been devastated by the loss of the child. She's completely broken down, acting crazy and irrational. I promised her I would marry her even without the child, but she doesn't believe me. Right now, with the shares and inheritance not settled, I can't publicly divorce her, nor can I legally marry her, but she just doesn't understand." Jack's expression gradually turned cold and hard. "I've had enough of these days. If she keeps acting like this, we can only part ways." I was very surprised, but after the initial shock, I felt this was something Jack would do. In their circle, Jack was remarkably loyal to Jenny. I heard that over the years, Jack really had no other woman besides Jenny. I should go back now, Jack. You don't need to talk to me about your problems. I don't want to hear them. Zoe. Jack looked at me. If that day, Jenny called me, and you didn't let me go, if I stayed, between us. Jack, there's no if. I calmly interrupted him. Jenny was always there, in our marriage, unchangeable. So our ending was always destined. You really like that man, huh? Jack's gaze lingered on my wrist for a moment, then dropped to my belly. Zoe, you know, the day at the hospital, by Grandma's bed, I knew you were pregnant. He suddenly laughed bitterly. At that moment, I wanted to kill you. If that man was standing in front of me, I would have stabbed him. But after calming down, I thought it through. What right do I have to be angry or upset? This is just my karma. Zoe, marrying me has put you through a lot, and now you're still willing to help me. Jack's tone was sincere. I feel really bad about it. No need to feel bad. Aren't you giving me $1 million? I joked with a smile. $1 million is quite a lot for me, really. Right after I finished speaking, my phone rang. It was Leo calling. I didn't answer and just stood up to leave. The driver is urging me. I have to go, Jack. Outside the room, I finally pressed to answer the call. Leo's voice was deep and tempting. Zoe, why are you taking so long? I'm just about to get in the elevator. I'm waiting in the car. Leo, why are you here? Am I that invisible to you? What are you talking about? I couldn't help but laugh. As I walked into the elevator and turned to press the floor number, I saw Jack standing not far off, watching me talk on the phone. I was startled for a moment, and as the elevator doors slowly closed, Jack's figure gradually disappeared. Out of the elevator, across the lobby, I saw Leo's incredibly expensive luxury car right away. I walked down the steps quickly, and the car door suddenly opened. Leo, dressed in a deep grey business suit, with cold and distant eyes, walked up to me. Zoe, you're pregnant, and you're still hopping down the steps. Don't worry, the last checkup showed your baby is very good and growing well. I looked up at him. In the future, I might rely on the baby to gain some status. I'll be careful. Zoe, why not the baby relying on you for status? I paused, trying to change the subject, but Leo pulled me into his arms. The elders already warned me. Our child can't be born without proper status. He must have a legitimate identity. So, once we get home, we'll register our marriage. I didn't lift my eyes to look at him, just stared at the intricate patterns on his suit coat, buttons until my eyes stung. I don't agree. I'll propose first, then get engaged. There will be an engagement ceremony, a marriage certificate ceremony, a wedding. Every step won't be missed. Because of the baby. My eyes turned red as I tried to push him away. Leo held me tighter, lowering his head to kiss my forehead gently. Because of Zoe. The day before Leo took me south, Jack transferred $1 million to my account. On the phone, he said, actually, the day I saw you sign the papers, I noticed the coral beads on your wrist. Those were my fourth brothers. He always had them with him. How could I not recognize them? Jack, now that I think about it, when my fourth brother returned to Hong Kong and said those things, they all had deeper meanings. Zoe, you're a good girl. You deserve my fourth brother. After Jack hung up, I noticed my bank balance showed 11 million. I was very surprised. That bank card was the one I gave to Leo, but Leo had returned it. I always thought there was only my million on top. On the plane back south, I leaned against Leo's chest. Half asleep, I asked him, why did you give me so much money? So you wouldn't suffer. So at least you'd have enough to not endure hardship. Why did you give me your number? Were you sure I'd call? I hoped you would, but also didn't. Leo stroked my hair. I wanted to come get you, but I was afraid you'd really be treated so badly. Leo, I couldn't help but bury myself in his chest. He smelled so good, a faint sandalwood scent. It put me at ease. Before I knew it, I fell asleep in his arms. Leo covered me with a blanket, holding me tight, never letting go. He didn't believe in love at first sight. But the first time he saw Zoe when he was young, he fell for her. The second time he saw her, he swore he would marry her. But Zoe had long forgotten him. That young girl back then, joyfully telling her best friend how she had a crush on him. She didn't know how happy he was when he heard those words. But later, he was suddenly taken back to Harbor City by his parents. When he finally had a chance to come back and look for her, she had already fallen for an older guy who played basketball. She watched him play every day. He stayed for 3 days, angry for 3 days, and never found her. After returning to Harbor City, he cut off contact with all his classmates. Years later, he saw her again, at her wedding with Jack. She was completely different from before. Her eyes didn't smile, shrouded in a deep sadness. Her brows always furrowed. Later he heard from Jack's servant that on the wedding night Jack didn't come home. He was at the Peninsula Hotel with his first love, for 2 whole years. He was furious and worried about her, so he found an excuse, staying in North City temporarily. Later, when she was secretly crying in the garden, he couldn't help but walk out. But Leo never expected Zoe to make that kind of request to him, and he had no way to refuse the girl he had liked since he was young. He regretted, despised himself for that, but in the end, he was incredibly grateful for compromising back then. What could be better than having the one you like sleeping in your arms, with their baby in her belly? Leo couldn't resist lowering his head to kiss her forehead. At lunchtime, when the stewardess courteously asked, Leo gently smiled, lowering his voice, "My wife is asleep. Please don't disturb us until she wakes up." The young and beautiful stewardess glanced enviously at the woman in his arms. In her sleep, her brows relaxed, her mouth slightly curving up, and the man holding her, noble in appearance, elegant in manners, wore a simple wedding ring on his long fingers, while on her wrist, there was only a stunning string of coral beads. Her skin was so fair, the beads on her wrist, unbelievably beautiful. Maybe many years later, the stewardess would still remember this happy newlywed couple. And years later, Leo and Zoe had a son and a daughter, and they remained as loving as ever. You see, the moon can be brought down. When Jack met the one he was willing to land for, no matter the distance, he would make his way to her, fall into her arms,